There were no gunshots, no car chases, no shattered glass, just the sound of stilettos echoing on marble and a woman's breathing as shallow as the empire she built. Brielle Monroe had ruled Instagram like a queen in silk and serum. Her empire crafted from rose gold packaging, filtered perfection, and lies layered like foundation. But none of that shimmered today. The courthouse lights weren't made for beauty lighting. They exposed every pore, every crack, every fraud. Across from her stood Malik Carter, her husband, her former shadow, the man whose silence she mistook for surrender. His expression didn't flicker, not even when she tried to smile as if this was just a negotiation, a misunderstanding, not the climax of an 18-month betrayal. But he didn't need to smile. He had something better: the truth. "Your Honor," his lawyer said calmly, sliding a USB onto the bench. "On this drive is the entire back-end code of Monroe Method, built and registered by Mr. Carter, long before Ms. Monroe filed for sole ownership. You'll also find export logs, bank transfers, and a confession recorded on March 12th between Ms. Monroe and her marketing director, openly admitting to concealing the source of the technology and laundering brand income through ghost affiliates." Brielle's breath hitched. For the first time in years, her lips didn't know what to say, because the twist wasn't that Malik knew. The twist was that he always knew, and waited. The courtroom blurred. Reporters scribbled. One juror actually gasped. But Brielle, she reached for her water bottle with a hand that no longer knew stability. The same hand that had signed away Malik's rights in secret. The same hand that had caressed another man hours before, shooting a YouTube skincare haul with the caption, "Couple Goals." She thought this was just another scandal, that she'd ride it out, post a tearful apology, pivot the narrative. But when the judge declared immediate seizure of her brand accounts, trademarks, and digital assets under federal fraud statute and ordered her to face IRS deposition within 72 hours, Brielle Monroe finally understood. This wasn't scandal. This was sentence. And Malik? He just stood there. Not smug, not vengeful, just free. Because the real punishment wasn't jail. It was erasure. Outside, the paparazzi surged like piranhas. But Malik didn't speak. He opened his phone. One final upload. A video he'd edited at 3 a.m. the night before. Brielle's secret meetings. Voice memos. Money trails. The truth. One frame. One caption. "She used me to build her empire. So I built her downfall." He clicked post. The internet roared. Sponsors pulled out in real time. Follower count dropping like blood pressure. Brielle's phone vibrated so violently she dropped it on the courthouse steps. It cracked. Fitting. The silence that followed wasn't peaceful. It was post-mortem. And Malik? He walked away. No statement, no revenge speech. Just one whisper caught by a nearby mic. "She left me for dead. I left her without a legacy." And as the screen fades, one final line appears. "Welcome to Karma Strikes, where betrayal builds the plot, but justice owns the final scene." If this story made your heart stop, good. That means you're alive. Now ask yourself, if the person you loved turned your life into content, would you let it slide? Or would you burn their empire with their own script? Hit like if you believe truth always finds its voice. Subscribe to join the next strike. And comment below, what would you do if you were Malik? Before the courtroom, before the scandal, before the empire fell apart in real time, there was a man who believed in forever and a woman who learned how to sell it. Malik Carter remembered it all. Not like a nostalgia reel, but like evidence in a case he never agreed to prosecute. The first time he saw Brielle Monroe, she was behind a cracked camera lens in a university cafeteria, vlogging about a moisturizer she couldn't afford. Her laugh was real then, raw, untrained, uncurated, and when their eyes met, something inside him settled. 2 months later, they were splitting rent in a moldy East Austin studio with dreams taped to the fridge. She called him her quiet king. He called her his storm in silk. He coded between freelance gigs. She edited beauty reels with fingers trembling from too much caffeine. Every late night, every meal skipped for savings, every argument about ROI, they survived it all with the same vow. We build it together, or we bury it together. It wasn't always poetic. They fought about lighting, about budget, about whether branding should come before fulfillment. But Malik always returned to one truth. When Brielle touched him, it felt like legacy. She believed in the future he could write in code, and he believed in the audience she could command with a glance. Their first viral hit was accidental, a tutorial titled Skin Care for Broke Babes, edited by Malik, voiceover by Brielle, filmed with a shoebox rig, 500K views, then 1M. Then a DM from a small cosmetic brand, then another, then deals, then invoices, then pressure, but it was still them. Until it wasn't. He didn't notice it at first, not when she started asking him to sit out video thumbnails. Just the product this time, babe. Not when she stopped tagging his dev handle. Not even when he noticed his name vanish from the footer of their website. He chalked it up to strategy. Optics. People don't buy from coders, she once whispered, brushing his cheek. They buy from queens. But queens don't come home at 3 a.m. on their partner's birthday, smelling of champagne and someone else's cologne. That night, his 34th, he had left a single cupcake on the counter. Vanilla, with a blue candle. She hadn't said a word, just walked past it in heels that screamed betrayal. He didn't ask, he just watched. And when she finally fell asleep in full makeup, he opened her MacBook for the first time in 2 years. That's when he found it. A folder titled Rebuild Plan. Inside, timelines, investor pitches, branding decks, none of which mentioned his name. But the file that destroyed him was a single email, auto-saved in drafts, never sent. Subject: narrative control. Body: if things go left, frame the split as creative differences. Say he couldn't handle growth. Use footage from our 2019 fight. Make it look like I carried the brand alone. Malik sat there for hours, still, silent, until the sun touched the blinds. And in that light, he didn't cry. He did something worse. He smiled. Because now, he understood. She didn't fall out of love. She executed an exit strategy. And the life they built? It wasn't a dream. It was a beta test. The next morning, he kissed her forehead, made her coffee, and started his own plan. He downloaded server logs, archived emails, retrieved the original patent file for the automation system, the same one she presented at VidCon as her vision. He contacted his old mentor from UT Austin to timestamp his original code. Then he created an offline vault, layered with dual encryption, named after the candle flavor, Vanilla 34. She never suspected a thing. She smiled wider. Blew kisses on live streams. Let Deshaun Myers appear in IG stories with team goals captions. And when she launched her biggest campaign yet, Glow Season, with Malik's code driving every product recommendation, she said to him that night, "You see? We're unstoppable." He kissed her hand and replied, "We are. Just not in the same direction." The twist came 2 weeks later. Brielle left her iPad unlocked in the bathroom. Malik wasn't even snooping. He just tapped the wrong screen. A text thread popped up. "We'll finish phasing him out after the Glow Season launch. He still thinks we're partners. LMAO." From Deshaun. Dated on the night she cried after sex and told Malik she felt disconnected. That night, something broke that wouldn't heal. But Malik didn't yell, didn't pack, didn't leave. He built. Because some men seek revenge, but others design it. Quietly, systematically, like code that rewrites itself when no one's looking. And when Brielle kissed him on their 5th anniversary, whispering, "Here's to 5 more," he smiled and renamed the backup file to The Last Toast. The night didn't fall. It cracked. A slow, aching rupture that bled through the edges of silence, dripping like tar into Malik Carter's chest as he stood barefoot on the marble floor, watching the glow of Brielle's iPad flicker across her vacant side of the bed. The house was quiet. Too quiet for a home that once danced with ideas and whispered ambitions. There was no music tonight, no candles, no aroma of her rose tea swirling in the hallway. Just the hiss of the smart diffuser she forgot to refill and the distant hum of something Malik could no longer name. His thumb hovered above the screen, still trembling from what he had just seen. A cache of deleted files she thought she erased. Voice memos, calendar notes, screen recordings, one in particular. Glow AI rollout, phase out Malik. That wasn't a mislabel. It was a strategy. And the voice narrating it was hers. Clinical, confident, like she was laying out a product launch instead of cutting him out of the empire they bled for together. He didn't close the file. He didn't move. He let her voice echo through the bedroom where they once whispered dreams into pillowcases, where she once said, "You're my forever partner, not just in love, in legacy." Legacy. That word now rotted in his ears. He remembered the night they decided to trademark Monroe Method, the way her hand slipped into his under the table, her eyes sparkling over the legal paperwork. That same hand had just signed a separation clause. She didn't even blink. Malik walked to the bathroom, not to breathe, but to disappear. In the mirror, his reflection looked like someone who had drowned in someone else's story. That's what he had become. A subplot. A useful chapter. He ran cold water, stared into the stream, and whispered, "I built the algorithm to learn her skin, and she used it to shed mine." In the hours that followed, time stopped pretending it was linear. He slipped into a trance-like state, somewhere between survival and simulation. Step by step, he began pulling the thread. His home network logs, camera metadata, audio trigger points from the echo recorders he'd planted out of a gut instinct months ago. She thought they were scent diffusers. They were signal collectors. Every call with Deshawn, every Zoom with her new core team, every offhand comment like, "He'll stay if I let him feel needed." All captured, all indexed, all broken into Malik's heart 1 kilobyte at a time. But it wasn't the affair. It wasn't even the betrayal. It was the rebranding of him. The careful PR lines she rehearsed alone at midnight. "We had different visions. He never really believed in what I saw for us. I carried this." She was rehearsing the eulogy of a man still breathing next to her. That was the true death. So he became what she never accounted for. Quiet code turned conscious will. He synced every file into a private node on the blockchain, created an immutable archive of contribution, authorship, timestamps. He didn't want to destroy her. Not yet. First, he wanted to restore himself. The digital version she tried to erase. Then came the moment that would fracture him entirely. A voice message, sent from Brielle to her brand director. "I'll use his last birthday as my exit point. Make it a clean break, a soft narrative. Maybe even frame it as mutual. No one needs to know the engine was never mine. Just the driver's seat." His birthday. The night he waited with a cupcake and a Spotify playlist. She had already scripted the ending. Malik walked outside into the midnight air, barefoot, holding only the Echo USB. The wind didn't chill him. The truth had already done that. He looked up, and for a second, the stars blurred into binary. Ones and zeros of what love becomes when it's programmed to lie. He returned inside, opened a new folder, titled it, The Echo Room. In it, he began to build not a revenge campaign, but a mirror, a perfect replica of Monroe method, except this one whispered the truth in every pixel. With one launch command, he could redirect every user to a page detailing the exact authorship timeline, complete with her voice mocking him, planning his removal. But he waited, because karma doesn't scream. It listens. And just before dawn, as Brielle stirred in bed, Malik whispered to the air, "You replaced me in the narrative, so I rewrote the system. Now tell me this. If the one you built an empire with turned you into a footnote, would you burn the kingdom?" It started with the smallest, most human sound, the clink of a silver spoon stirring honey into tea. Brielle's hands moved with the same elegance that once sketched out the Monroe method on a napkin, that once reached for Malik's beneath the courtroom table as they filed the LLC. She sat across from him now, bathed in morning light that didn't touch her skin the way it used to, saying with a breathy chuckle, "You should come to the Glow Summit. It might inspire you." Her words floated gently, but Malik heard them like code, each syllable another line in a program he was finally ready to compile. He smiled, soft, practiced. She didn't know. She never would. Because when a system is about to collapse, it doesn't shake or scream. It simply recalibrates, quietly, precisely. Malik Carter had stopped being a man. He had become a mirror, a protocol. He'd long buried the lover, the co-founder, the dreamer. What remained was a quiet architect of ruin, dressed in silence. And so, while Brielle rehearsed talking points in the mirror upstairs, phrases like intuitive innovation, female-led vision, the empathy of technology, Malik was downstairs building a second system, a reflection of hers, a living archive of every lie layered in metadata, indexed and tagged not for search, but for detonation. He rewired the routers, redirecting traffic through a ghost node he built into a decoy server under the label Lumina Backup. Harmless enough to avoid detection, but powerful enough to collect every data movement she made, her browser, her keystrokes, the private logins to the investor dashboard where she ran simulations under her name alone. Malik didn't just collect files, he studied behavior. He knew when her voice cracked slightly before lying, knew she held her breath 0.7 seconds longer before saying "we" in meetings. The empire she built off his back was now feeding its way back into his hands, bit by encrypted bit. But Malik wasn't satisfied with digital surveillance. This wasn't a simple exposé. He wanted her collapse to come from within her own machine, to be so precise it felt surgical. So he reached out, not to hackers, not to tabloids, but to the ghosts she left behind. Leona, the brilliant but too emotional brand designer who vanished after a creative conflict. Elandra, the original content producer who got cut out post-Series A funding. Both remembered. Both had receipts, and both were eager for truth. They didn't meet in cafes. They met on encrypted Zoom calls where Malik shared his findings, not as ammunition, but as coordinates. "I don't need dirt," he told Leona. "I just need light, enough to show what's already cracked." In return, they handed him the unwashed truth. Emails, draft logos, unreleased brand reels where Malik's voice explained the vision in year one. Footage Brielle had sworn never existed. Each artifact was a puzzle piece. Malik arranged them with the calm precision of a sound engineer balancing frequencies. He layered voice memos with visual timelines, matched metadata with product rollouts, built a 90-second audio-visual payload so dense in truth it didn't accuse. It showed. It didn't destroy. It reflected. And most importantly, it didn't launch on his command. It had a trigger, a word, Legacy. He coded the entire sequence to activate only when Brielle said it live on stage at the Glow Summit. She always did. It was her favorite word. Her brand was built around it. She wouldn't know it. But the moment those 3 syllables left her lips, the entire audience would receive the frequency of her empire, a data collage of betrayal delivered through her own tone, her own timing, her own damn mouth. But even that wasn't enough. Because precision without pressure is just vanity, and Malik was building vengeance engineered to collapse in silence. He began testing the ecosystem not by breaking it, but by feeding it shadows. First, a subtle PR misstep. He anonymously leaked a Slack screenshot of Brielle mocking a disabled fan's comment on an accessibility feature. Not aggressive, not viral-worthy, just cold enough to feel real. It didn't ruin her. It shifted the axis. Comments began appearing under her videos. Why no closed captions? This doesn't feel inclusive anymore. She blamed interns. Her social manager fumbled a statement. That was wave 1. Then came the timing attacks. He'd slightly alter her calendar syncs by milliseconds, causing missed investor syncs, duplicate Zooms, and a double-booked interview. Brielle blamed tech, but the seed was planted. Cracks weren't coming from outside. They were inside the system she called flawless. All while this unfolded, Malik constructed the second trigger. Not the word legacy, but an emotional pressure point. He coded the live stream interface to freeze the moment Brielle's voice registered above a 72-decibel pitch, her signature keynote crescendo. If she got excited, passionate, fired up, the system would glitch. It would feel like coincidence, like karma. But it was Malik, watching, measuring, waiting. And Brielle, she started to notice. She began pausing more often, glancing at her devices like they were whispering behind her back. Malik remained still. He was the tea-maker, the quiet husband, the supportive co-founder on sabbatical. But in reality, he had overwritten her confidence with doubt. She no longer moved through her brand. She tiptoed through it. Meanwhile, Malik and Elandra finished the final edit of the audio-visual payload. It opened with her own voice, saying, "He thinks this is about love. It's about leverage." Then overlays of pitch decks marked co-authored, but presented solo. Timeline overlays showing Malik's GitHub commits days before launch, uncredited. Finally, a glitchy recording of her whispering to Deshawn during a rooftop party. "The algorithm isn't him. I am the algorithm." The edit didn't scream. It didn't accuse. It simply bled truth like ink in water. Slow. Irreversible. To add a final stroke, Malik coordinated with Leona to publish a Medium article under a pseudonym, "When Code Has No Name." It detailed the emotional theft in tech startups, how brilliance is often erased not with malice, but with narrative. It didn't name Brielle. It didn't need to. The industry knew. The piece went semi-viral, just enough that the Glow Summit's press coordinator flagged it in a pre-event PR brief as potential media friction. And still, Brielle didn't flinch. She rehearsed harder, tighter. Her final run-through ended with her saying, "The Monroe method is my child. I raised it alone." Alone. Malik watched from behind the hallway mirror, lips parted, but silent. He almost pitied her. But pity is the privilege of the unbroken. And Malik? Malik had learned to program his pain. The night before the summit, he stood at the foot of their bed, watching her sleep, whispering to the dark, "Tomorrow, you won't fall because I pushed. You'll fall because you leaned too hard on a lie." The summit unfolded like a perfectly choreographed illusion. From the moment Malik stepped onto the gleaming floors of the conference venue, everything shimmered with the polish of curated modernity. LED walls pulsing with soft gradients, the air fragrant with diffused eucalyptus. Ambient synths playing at a tempo meant to soothe, but not distract. He moved like a shadow through the crowd, his steps absorbed by the carpet, his presence unnoticed, unremarkable. No badge, no entourage, just a man carrying nothing but silence and inevitability. From row 4, seat C, he saw the stage where her legacy would bloom and burn. Brielle floated onto that stage in power white, her silhouette cut sharp against the wash of brand colors behind her. Her confidence was not acted. It was built, brick by pixel, layer by algorithm, all rehearsed into perfection. She inhaled like a performer about to sing the national anthem, a ritual she'd mastered. The audience hushed. Her voice emerged steady, magnetic. What makes an empire resilient isn't just innovation. It's intuition. And the Monroe method began with one question. How do we code empathy? Heads nodded. Pens scribbled. Phones hovered. And Malik, motionless in the 4th row, watched it all through a gaze that no longer held resentment, only completion. Her rhythm was flawless. Every phrase landed like a melody she'd sung 1,000 times. But Malik knew the measure she hadn't rehearsed. He knew the note that would crack her harmony. And it came, as he expected, in her 3rd act, as her hand lifted in a gentle arc and her voice deepened with reverence. This is my legacy. The system didn't crash. It exhaled. A microscopic delay flickered across the screen, undetectable to most. But to Malik, it was the signal that the program had awakened. The background image behind Brielle froze mid-transition, like a breath caught in the throat. Then the audio system dropped to 0 ambient input. A hush descended. Not silence, but vacuum. The kind that distorts reality. And then her voice. Not live. Not recent. A playback, sharp and cold. He's smart but soft. You need steel to lead. He's aluminum. The sentence didn't ring out. It settled, like a slow leak from a ceiling no one knew was cracked. The audience didn't gasp. They stiffened, their eyes shifting from her to the screen behind her, where the next sequence had already begun. A private call, a clipped laugh from Deshawn, a lawyer's clinical tone. Phase him out after his birthday, clean PR split, assign IP rights fully to her. Then back to Brielle, rehearsing in a voice note never meant to be heard. Once I take the stage alone, no one will remember him. I'll be the algorithm. The room didn't erupt. It froze. Phones didn't rise immediately. They hovered, as if users were unsure whether they were witnessing performance art or a technical collapse. Then the screen behind her shifted. White text appeared against a black void. Original algorithm timeline. Carter.m 01/14/2018. Verified Git history. Video proof embedded. A gentle glitch at the edges gave the feeling of a broadcast slipping off its rails. Brielle stood at the podium, blinking, lips parted as if words had left her but breath hadn't returned. She looked directly into the lights, into the abyss beyond the audience, and whispered, "This isn't real." But her mic cut, not by malfunction, but by design. Malik had anticipated her panic pitch. He had mapped her vocal range over 6 months, and when she crossed 75 decibels in duress, the system muted her and replaced her feed with a final loop. Her voice, slow and deliberate, layered over static. "He doesn't even know he's the beta version of me." Now the phones rose. Dozens. Then hundreds. The loop continued. Hashtags began crawling across Twitter. Monroe unmasked. Echo room. He wrote the code. The press, stunned at first, began scribbling, filming. The brand Brielle built on grace and vision had just become a case study in coded betrayal. And Malik? Malik didn't move. He didn't blink. He simply watched, hands resting in his lap, as everything unfolded exactly as it had in his mind, frame by frame, frequency by frequency. He didn't smile. Victory wasn't loud. It was this, the moment where truth was so undeniable, no explanation could undo it. He rose slowly, straightened his collar, and began walking toward the aisle, not with triumph, but with stillness, like a man stepping away from a fire he didn't light, but one he knew would find its spark. The air outside the summit felt 10 degrees colder, though no one had opened the doors. It was the kind of drop that comes not from temperature, but from truth. When something sacred is broken, and everyone around feels the crack echo inside themselves. Malik stepped out beneath the overhang as rain began to fall. Not dramatic, not cinematic, just sharp, even drops, as if the world itself was calibrating. Behind him, through the wide glass facade of the conference center, he could still see her silhouette, frozen on stage, back turned to the crowd, as the looped phrase, "He doesn't even know he's the beta version of me," bled into digital ether. But that wasn't the end. Inside the conference center, chaos unfolded with elegance. PR reps whispered urgently into earpieces. The summit director killed the main feed, but the QR codes had already been scanned. Within 7 minutes, the full video was reposted across tech journalism blogs. Reddit threads exploded. Tweets compared her fall to Theranos, to WeWork. A LinkedIn thread titled, "Why Emotional IP Theft Matters in Startup Culture" was upvoted into virality. The damage wasn't just public. It was systematic. And Brielle? She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She walked off stage like a marionette whose strings had been cut but was still mimicking the dance. Behind the curtain, her team looked at her not with shock, but with distance, as if her glow had been turned off, and all they saw now was a woman who had mistaken curation for creation. She called for Malik, not as husband, not as co-founder, but as shield. "Where is he?" she demanded. "He did this." But no one answered. No one had seen him leave, because Malik hadn't exited through the front. He took the west corridor, past the green rooms, down the hall where 6 years ago he and Brielle once pitched the Monroe method to their very first investor. He paused there now, letting memory wash over him like a ripple through glass. There had been laughter here once, hope, and betrayal, born in the same breath. He stepped into the rain, crossed the nearly empty lot, and reached the storm drain near the curb. From his coat pocket, he pulled the USB, sleek, silver, familiar. He held it a moment longer than necessary, then dropped it. It clinked once against the metal grate, then vanished into the dark. Behind him, the building glowed less now, like a cathedral that had just lost its choir. The last moment, a drone shot rising slowly, pulling away from Malik as he walked down the street. Not triumphant, not broken. Just done. And overlaid in glitching text on the screen, Monroe method, system error, legacy input not found. Now you tell me this. If the code they stole wrote your pain and the silence you kept became your power, would you speak? Or would you program their end? Comment below. The wind curled around the steps of Cook County Courthouse like it had come not to chill the air, but to whisper warnings through the marble columns. Inside, everything was too bright, too sharp, the fluorescent lights slicing across the mahogany panels like surgical tools, casting reflections in courtroom glass that made everyone look like ghosts of themselves. Malik Carter sat at the plaintiff's table, not in a power suit or a crafted pose, but in quiet certainty, the kind that's forged not by anger, but by time. His jaw clenched only once, when he glanced at the screen before him and saw the folder labeled Malik v. Monroe. That name, hers, still attached to something built from his bones. His hands didn't shake, but the air around them did. Brielle Monroe entered like a remnant of her former empire, her stride still symmetrical, her suit pressed in monochrome black, but her presence quieter. Less weapon, more wound. She didn't look at him. Not once. Instead, she walked like the room owed her still, like if she kept her chin high enough, the narrative might rewrite itself in her favor. Her legal team trailed her like smoke, fading with every step. Judge Vera Knowles, stern and precise, struck the gavel with the kind of finality that felt like a prologue closing. We are here today to deliberate authorship and intellectual property claims concerning the Monroe Method. Plaintiff, Mr. Malik Carter. Defendant, Ms. Brielle Monroe. Malik's attorney, Evelyn Shaw, rose, a presence of controlled rage and relentless facts. She approached the court like she was stepping into a machine she'd already dismantled once before. Your Honor, what we are discussing today is not simply code. It is not a prototype or a pitch deck. It is authorship, identity, and the deliberate erasure of a man's legacy beneath the polish of a rebranded truth. The defendant did not merely omit Mr. Carter's name. She replaced it. And today, we will restore it. She nodded to the technician. A screen blinked on. What played next wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. The first video, Malik, in a dimly lit apartment, scribbling algorithms on a glass board, time-stamped 3 years before Monroe AI even trended. Then came overlays, emails, Git commits, Figma prototypes signed Carter M. All while audio floated above like a haunting. Brielle's voice saying, "He builds because I dream, he codes because I command." Gasps in the gallery. Someone whispered, "That's her voice, right?" No one answered. The camera panned to Brielle, her eyes fixed on the screen, her expression unreadable, but her throat moved once, swallowing something she couldn't code away. The playback stopped, not with a fade, but a jolt, as if even the courtroom couldn't contain the weight of what had just been unspooled. Judge Knowles adjusted her glasses, her eyes narrowing. "Does the defense wish to respond to the presented evidence?" There was a pause. Brielle's lawyer, a man whose tie cost more than Malik's entire wardrobe, stood slowly, but Brielle placed a hand on his forearm, stopping him. The courtroom murmured. She rose. Alone. Her voice was different now. No longer branding, no longer curated. It cracked at the edges, like someone trying to read a script she didn't write. Yes, he wrote the first versions. He built the engine. But the idea, Monroe Method, it didn't begin with him either. It wasn't mine. It was our father's. Gasps. Not because it made sense, but because it didn't. Malik blinked. Once. Like he'd just been struck in the chest by a sentence he never rehearsed for. Brielle continued, her gaze shaky but locked on the judge. He wrote a paper in 1999, Behavioral Fractals in Predictive Systems. He said empathy could be patterned. I found it after he died. That's where it started. Malik didn't know, but I did. The silence that followed was unbearable. Not because of the words, but because of what they tried to steal. Origin. Malik's fists tightened, not in rage, but in refusal. This wasn't revelation. It was desperation dressed as confession. And for a moment, the courtroom became a war of ghosts. Malik's silence, Brielle's reinvention, their father's forgotten voice echoing through both of them like code without an end point. Then, movement. The back door opened. A woman entered. Heels sharp, presence sharper. Leona. She held a folder like a blade, her eyes set like crosshairs. Your Honor, may I speak? The judge nodded. I was the lead PR consultant on the Monroe Method for 2 years. I ghost-wrote half of her launch content. I was paid to erase him. She placed the folder on the bench. Inside, emails, memos, deleted Slack messages, investor pitches, all marked with early drafts that included Malik's name, his signature algorithms, his contributions, then later versions with him systematically removed, redacted, rewritten, rebranded. Leona's voice didn't shake. I watched her replace him, not because he failed, but because he was quiet. She said quiet doesn't sell. Now the room split. Some people turned toward Brielle, the illusion snapping. Others stared at Malik, not in pity, but recognition. He wasn't the sidekick. He was the code. And just when it felt like truth had hit its final note, Malik stood, not to accuse, but to finish the sequence. He walked to the center, eyes locked with the judges, his voice low but cutting. I never wanted a brand. I wanted my name next to my work. She took that, and now I'm taking it back. The air inside the courtroom felt viscous now, like time had thickened, like every second dragged its own shadow. Judge Knowles leaned back, the weight of legacy and evidence sinking into the wood grain of her bench. Her voice, when it returned, was calm, but irreversible. This court recognizes the submitted materials, the corroborated witness testimony, and the authenticated design logs. We find that Mr. Malik Carter is the original and sole author of the algorithm known as the Monroe Method. There was no gavel strike. There didn't need to be. The sound of the world rearranging itself was louder than anything she could have conjured. The courtroom didn't erupt. It held its breath, its disbelief, its shame. A low murmur crawled across the rows like wind over dry leaves. But Malik didn't smile. He didn't blink. He didn't look at Brielle. He turned, slowly, and walked toward Leona, the woman who had once played accomplice, now penance. She nodded, a silent acknowledgement. The lie is done. And then came the twist that no one expected. As Malik reached the exit, a security officer handed the judge a new folder, a whistleblower drop, from a former investor. Inside, a secondary fund routing, forged contracts. Brielle had not only erased Malik, she had siphoned over $3.2 million meant for development, funneled into a Cayman shadow account under a shell named Fractal Bloom LLC, her father's old term. The courtroom gasped as the numbers scrolled on screen. Brielle staggered visibly. The last algorithm she ran had just turned on her. Her lawyer whispered. Her knees buckled. For the first time in her life, Brielle Monroe was no longer in control of the narrative. But Malik? He didn't even turn back. Outside, Chicago's late afternoon sun broke through clouds like vindication in photons. Malik stepped into it, not with a hero's stride, but with the quiet grace of someone who had nothing left to prove. Reporters rushed him. He said nothing, just looked into the lens of the nearest camera and said, "Truth doesn't trend, but it survives." Cut to black. And over it, text glitching into place. Justice isn't loud, it's permanent. Would you have stayed silent like Malik, or struck back like lightning? Comment below. Karma's still watching. The light in Chicago no longer glares. It lingers. Like Karma herself was walking through the city, her heels soft on concrete, brushing past headlines that no longer scream but hum with memory. In a quiet corner of Grant Park, Malik Carter sits alone on a wooden bench, his shadow stretched long across the winter-faded grass. He no longer wears the badge of victimhood. There is no audience now, no courtroom, no gallery of faces turned to him like prophecy. There is only the quiet after the storm, and the breath between justice and aftershock. 3 months since the trial, and the city breathes differently. Billboards no longer flash the Monroe Method, the media moved on. But deep inside AI communities, in underground code repositories and whispered meetups, Malik is not forgotten. He is not mentioned by name. He is referenced by integrity. A protocol adjustment called the Carter Clause is implemented silently into thousands of tech contracts. You cannot strip authorship without trace. His legacy is embedded, not shouted. He lives now in a high-rise with no nameplate. His morning begins not with interviews, but with bitter coffee and silent readings of old code bases. He never gave interviews again. But once, just once, he allowed a camera from the New Yorker to capture him. No stylist, no production, just Malik in a sun-drenched room, speaking slow into the lens. Justice doesn't always look like applause. Sometimes it's just knowing they can't delete you anymore. Across the city, Brielle lives quieter too. The empire is gone. So is the illusion. Her name, once a brand, now a burden she carries into every podcast, every TEDx where she speaks of unlearning ambition. But the world listens with measured curiosity, unsure if redemption can be this curated. Her most watched talk, How I Survive My Own Algorithm, ends with a pause, and then a whisper. Malik, I remember the loop you taught me. That was real. But the story does not end with her, or him. Because karma never finishes with headlines. She waits in footnotes. In Berlin, a small startup builds a child AI on the bones of Monroe Method and names it M. In its GitHub repo, buried in metadata, is a note. To the one who wrote first and wrote true, we see you. The line goes viral, not as meme, but as message. And in a world drowning in noise, recognition whispered through code cuts deeper than applause ever could. Malik sees it, reads it, says nothing. But later that night, uploads a patch to the old Monroe repo with one silent comment. Truth doesn't scale, but it spreads. That's silence, louder than any verdict. And in the final scene, Malik stands before a group of Black and Latino students in a free coding workshop. No cameras, just voices, soft and unsure. He speaks, not about Brielle, not even about himself. He speaks of theft, of rebuilding, of the fingerprint you leave in silence. If you build, he says, write your name. If they erase it, write again. If they burn it, etch it into the silence. Code is not neutral, and silence is not passive. Fade to black. Text appears, glitching into place, each word stamped with slow finality. And that's how karma struck. Not as vengeance, but as permanence. If you've ever been erased, if you've had your truth rewritten by louder voices, drop your story below. Like the video if Malik's story spoke to you. Subscribe to follow more true tales, where karma doesn't whisper, she returns. And share this if you believe truth isn't dead. It's just quiet, too quiet.